If you're thinking about changing schools, why wait? At Manhattan University, love those guys. You don't have to start over. With transfer-friendly pathways, your credits count, and you keep moving forward. From day one, you're part of Jasper Nation, preparing for the real world. And with New York City just a train away, opportunity is everywhere. Ready to move forward without missing a step? Visit manhattan.edu/transfer and enroll today. Manhattan University. Don't start over, move forward.
This is Cop Talk, talking crime, cases, and backing the blue. Now, here are your hosts, Captain Ed Mehmet and Detective Kevin Schroeder.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Cop Talk. I'm Kevin Schroeder, your host, and unfortunately, my co-host, the famous Captain Ed Mehmet, cannot be here today, but we welcome him back real soon. Today, my guest co-host is going to be retired second-grade detective from the Manhattan DA's office, Judy Newton.
Yes, hello, Kevin.
Thanks for being here, Judy.
You're welcome.
And today on Cop Talk, we're honored to have Michael Scotto. Michael Scotto is a former ADA in the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. He's also the former chief of Rackets in the DA's office. He also had a run at Senate, and he had a run at the Nassau County District Attorney's Office. And he's here today. And Michael, welcome.
Thank you, Kevin. And thank you, Judy.
So,
you're welcome.
So, Mike, let's go back. Let's tell our listeners your background, where you're born and raised and what got you into,
Sure.
where'd you go to law school, et cetera.
Yeah. So I was born in Brooklyn, like pretty much everybody I knew growing up. Moved out to Long Island later on. Went to school in the city at NYU. Those were very interesting days in the 80s. Ended up at Brooklyn Law School. Never thought I would be a prosecutor. I had a professor who saw that I had an interest in criminal law and evidence and kind of encouraged me to apply. And I ended up working at the Manhattan DA's office in August of 2019, August of 1989.
Good year, 1989.
August 21st, 1989, in the same class as John F. Kennedy Jr. And so I was assigned to the trial division, Trial Bureau 50. And if anybody ever had cases in Manhattan, it was Warren Murray's trial bureau. He was a former, I shouldn't say former Marine. You're always a Marine. He ran the bureau like the Marine that he was. And, basically street crime for my first 5 years in the office. And I have to say that, just thinking about today and talking about that experience, I took a look at the stats from 1989, and it's incredible that there were 62,293 felony drug arrests, right? 1989, it was the height of the war against drugs, the Rockefeller drug laws. There was a Hollywood movie that came out, I think, 2 years later in 91, New Jack City, right? So if anybody wants to see as close to a documentary of what those days were like, obviously it's a dramatized depiction, but that was the crack days, the crack wars, the narcotics division going out and making buy and bust every day, and then it expanded to TNT. And we were doing, as it turns out, citywide, it was 170 felony arrests a day. Indictments were in the thousands. And even if you look back at those days, with the drug trade, and it was mostly, it's interesting how the drugs have kind of, back in 89 when I started, heroin was like, nobody was involved in heroin. And then because of Oxy, heroin's, back in style. But, it was crack cocaine. It was powder cocaine. It was even, people were still snorting angel dust. And then, you see the violence that comes with that. And of course, they were also doing buys and busts for large quantities of marijuana when marijuana was illegal. But those were, very, very challenging days. The police worked closely with them in the DA's office. And, it's the one thing that's true about that TV series, Law and Order, about the only thing that's true, because nobody ever confesses in the middle of a trial. Right. The only thing that's true is there's two parts of the criminal justice system: the police that investigate the crimes, right? Mm-hmm. And the prosecutors who prosecute them. And so I'm happy to be here today and happy to talk about my experiences.
Before I jump over to Judy. So in 1989, I was in anti-crime Midtown North precinct.
Okay, so we probably had cases without even knowing it.
So my partner was good friends with Kevin Hines.
Okay.
We used to bring all our pickpocket cases, grand larcenies, robberies, right to the Trial Bureau 50, which was James Burke, who's a judge. Okay.
Right. Yes.
Kevin Gagan.
Kevin Gagan ended up at the Attorney General's office and then the state police's counsel. Those were all my rookie buddies.
Right. And I also had a couple of cases with JFK Jr.
Yeah, hey, he was a good guy.
Oh,
really good
very
guy.
nice guy. Matter of fact, a couple of times we gave him a ride home, and he lived in Soho, as you know. We gave him a ride home after we had a break in the after we'd have a grand jury. We'd give him a ride home to his apartment. He'd go there for lunch or whatever, and we put him in our anti-crime taxi cab, put him home, and we didn't bring him back. It wasn't a round trip, but he was good. He was good. But Trial Bureau 50 had some great people there, and actually the entire Manhattan DA's office at the time, back in 1989.
Right, under Mr. Morgenthau was really the best prosecutor's office in the country. You know, when people say, did you work at the, what DA's office? Is it the DA's office?
Right.
So that's what I'll say. I worked at the DA's office.
Right, Manhattan, and the only one.
The only one, as far as I'm concerned.
Right.
Yeah.
Judy?
Yeah, and also, Michael, we have done so much together because remember, I came out of the Manhattan DA squad also.
Yeah, of course.
And that was the flagship DA squad in the city.
Yep, that was, that movie, I guess, Prince of the City was that office. And I have to say many of the alumni from there have gone on to, successful careers after retiring and investigations and whatnot. Obviously, Judy now is going to be a radio celebrity. So that's something for her. And I know she works in education and she has not-for-profits. But yeah, we worked together. I mean, Judy was doing identity fraud cases back when they really, kind of a new thing. People didn't know about those things. And she certainly lectured on that. And we've stayed close over the years.
Yeah, not bad for a transit cop. That's where you started.
Right, that's right. Everybody started. That's the other thing. It seems like everybody started out in transit.
Sure, well, it was a dirty job, and we had to do it.
Yeah,
and
look, you had a cop on every train. Those were some bad days. So when the transit police really started patrolling and it was aggressive and it was something that made me feel safe taking the subways every day.
Yeah,
sure, a chicken in every pot.
Right.
True. But go ahead, Judy. Sorry.
Yeah. Michael, how did you transition from your time spent at the DA's office to the leading defense attorney that you are today?
Well, I think, the transition was easy because I don't represent really bad people, right? So there's a Sixth Amendment and people have the right to an attorney, but they don't have a right for me to be their attorney. And over the last, I've been doing this 13 years, I've represented people who, back in the day, it might have just been the cops would have let somebody go home now. And it's not the police, it's just the system that everything results in an arrest, right? I had 2 cases in the last couple of years where people called 911 looking for help. Somebody was having a mental health crisis, so they called for their girlfriend. That guy ended up getting arrested, right? Another woman was defending herself, and somebody's, threatening her with a box cutter, and she pepper sprayed the guy. She gets arrested. Guy doesn't get charged. So, I'm not saying I represent everybody who's innocent, but I don't represent hardened criminals. It's, professional people who had a bad day. And for a while, there was a niche practice that I had where, unfortunately, in a divorce action, one of the spouses will file a complaint, to get an advantage, to get the spouse out of the house. So I saw a whole bunch of cases like that. But there is a perception that if you're arrested, you must have done something wrong. And by the way, that's actually pretty fair, but it's a question of what you did and whether it rose to a crime. And ultimately, people say, well, the police this, the police that. Well, the police are being called somewhere and they're being told something and they have to act. So for instance, the patrol guide requires a must arrest if there's a domestic violence situation, even if there's, reports in some cases 2 weeks old, that's 1 under, you're taking them back. Right. So, the police can only do what we ask them to do. And again, just because you're arrested, something happened. So it was an easy transition because, again, I never represented anyone in 13 years that I wouldn't feel comfortable, introducing to you, really. I mean, just regular people who get caught up in a situation. And I've been fortunate. And again, maybe that's just because I was a prosecutor for 23 years, and obviously everybody deserves, an attorney, but I don't have to represent anybody that I don't want. And I haven't.
Right. Most of your cases in Nassau County or Manhattan?
No, it's really wherever somebody calls me and they need me to go. Mostly in the city investigations. Unfortunately, the DA's offices have not been as active as they have been in the past. And, federally, I mean, everybody, when you get arrested, you want to talk about presumption of innocence. If you're arrested by the feds, it's pretty much you're just talking about what you're going to plead guilty to. So those cases aren't really a lot of fun to represent people, although I've had some success there where, there's two sides of a story, right? And when the agent calls up your client and says, oh, you got to bring a lawyer in and you're going to plead guilty, well, then maybe you want to tell your side of the story and then they never call you up again. Right. So, but it's really wherever anybody's in need. So Nassau, Suffolk, New York City, Queens is kind of a different culture. Kings County I've been to, quite often. And, nobody's called me for the Bronx. I guess I'll have to get my passport renewed to get up there. But really, wherever anybody's in need. But again, mostly white collar people and, government investigations, things like that.
Right. I'm sure the juries you dealt with in Nassau and Suffolk County versus Brooklyn and Manhattan are a little different.
They're a little different, although I have to say the juries, it's with all the technology, right? Jurors are looking for more. That's the one thing about, it's not just the raw statistics, what changed from 89 to say this year, right? Oh, the other bad statistic, 1989, 1,905 murders, right? Thank God, 2025, it's citywide, 305, right? So not only has crime gone down, but crime's gone down because of technology. So now people are expecting more. If you're in a jury, you're expecting DNA, you're expecting fingerprints. It had fingerprints, but video. DNA was a new thing. Video, right? Ring doorbells, right? They find people, if hit and run, fatal hit and run. They go to the neighborhood. They say, "Hey, do you have a Ring doorbell?" Then they catch people. And look, everybody has a recording studio, right? Right here, right? So, that's the evidence. And frankly, I've always thought body cameras for the police were a good thing, right? I know now pretty much everybody, NYPD's had them for years, Nassau, Suffolk, but, some of the unions, kind of, resisted that. And my thought was, well, why wouldn't you want to have a record of everything that went on, right? Because what we're seeing on TV often is somebody snipping, the part where they don't see where the guy's smacking the girl on the street. They see when the cops roll up and they're, arresting the guy with however much force they need to use because he was just, beating the crap out of somebody. So I always have thought body cameras are great. But again, to get to your point, the juries are more educated. They're looking for more. Are they more conservative in the outer boroughs, in the suburbs? Yeah, I would say so. But, I think you always want a smart jury. And we've always had success with those cases in Manhattan when I was a prosecutor. And the cases that you take to trial as a defense attorney, you only take to trial if, you can win or you can't afford to plead guilty. Most cases, again, resolve themselves with some sort of plea bargain. Yeah. But again, I think the difference between the jury pool is not as stark as it was, say 30 years ago.
Listen to this podcast now on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Leadership Thread with Dr. Peggy Polonis.
I'm Dr. Peggy Polonis. Join me on each episode where I unravel the story that shaped leaders, tracing the thread that led them where they are today. Because leadership isn't born in adulthood. And thank you once again for joining us on the Leadership Thread, education, ethics, and sustainability.
Download all of Red Apple Media's podcasts right now through your favorite podcast platform.
Yeah, I agree with the body cam. Of course, nobody wanted them.
Nobody wanted them. Yeah,
but it really helps a lot the arresting officer, the situation, and,
right.
And I think that's a good thing. Judy?
Well, nobody wanted the body cams because, as human nature has it, we tend to be creatures of habit, and we weren't used to them. And oftentimes we're afraid of the unknown.
Right. And nobody wants to have everything they do in a day recorded, So some of the arguments were, well, you should put them on politicians. Yeah, God, we should have everybody wearing a body cam, right?
Yeah.
But, it's again, the ability of the police to protect themselves. So if they and by the way, if there's a situation where they think they saw something, it's going to be on video whether they did or not, but that there's something behind, a claim that, oh my gosh, I saw a gun or I saw this or I saw that. So, I think it's and if you don't have them, I think the juries or the community are going to think, what are the police covering up?
Yeah.
But again, I think it's important that the police's version of what happened is recorded, because everybody out there has their phones and it all is out there on the internet. And sometimes if there's nothing where the police, where the government can put their narrative up there, it looks terrible, right?
Right. No, true. Even some security firms using body cams, cameras, the security guards, which is a good
right. And look, you could get them on Amazon. I had a client, a domestic violence case, and I said, listen, you when you go in and you're allowed to go into the house, this is one of these ones where the charges are trumped up. I said, you can go to Amazon. It's like $100, get a body cam. He thought I was kidding. I said, no, because she's going to go into the precinct and she's going to say X, Y, and Z, and the cops are going to say, we got to arrest you. By the way, even if the cops have no choice. So if they don't decide whether or not, he's right, she's right. It's like, again, one under, that's what they said. So it'll be sorted out later on. But again, body cameras, it just makes sense. And just with the technology, just after that, in the 80s, we were talking about pagers, right? And you used to try to get a wiretap to get a pager, and then you could see the coded messages like, 22 and 8th or whatever. Then there were the alphanumeric ones where you could actually have some letters.
Right.
Now everybody has a cell phone.
Yep.
The wiretaps are so much easier as far as the technology. And again, that's another bit of evidence that the juries are looking for. But I think the reduction in crime came from, partnering with the police, the DA's offices, being aggressive. And look, broken windows. Nobody likes to talk about broken windows. I guess if I ever run for office again, somebody will say, Scotto was in favor of broken windows. But, everything is a tool, right? And tools can be abused. So stop and frisk, right? Stop, question, and frisk, as my friend Judy would always point out, right? Am I correct in that?
Yes.
It's not just stop and frisk, right?
Correct.
Right?
That's true.
So that could be abused. But on the other hand, when it's done correctly and you're not, just tossing everybody, you're able to get guns off the street. And that's, in my opinion, the way that we had these very large decreases in violent crime, right? Because that was driven by weapons possession and the drug trade. So again, I think the technology, using the tools that we have, and not having those tools abused, and having the police out there as our first line of defense. The city has done very well in the last 35 years, and look, I hope it continues this trend.
Right.
Yeah. Also, eyewitness testimony varies. We know this.
Yeah.
Because there are three of us here, and we perceive things differently in scope. So the technology helps.
Right. Now, the downside of the technology is it creates hundreds and hundreds and thousands of hours of video that then have to be reviewed and turned over because of the discovery laws, which they've recently changed a little bit to make it a little easier for the DA's offices to comply. But sometimes you have too much information. But again, I'd rather have the too much information and deal with that than have a lack of information. Because as Judy pointed out, you can have three people see the exact same thing and have three different perspectives. And literally, I'm dating myself, Kevin, Judy, you'll know this. They like, Warner Wolf, let's go to the videotape, right?
Exactly.
Let's go to the videotape. You go and you see the videotape, and video doesn't lie, right? Sure, you have deep fakes, et cetera, but when it's authenticated and it's presented by the government, it doesn't lie. You see what you see. It sometimes doesn't capture the whole scene, but it's a lot better than a cop saying, hey, I saw somebody do this from the top of a rooftop. And, I do remember a case where, they had an observation post top of a 5-story building and they're looking down with the binoculars and it's like 3 a.m. and the woman's selling 2 glass scenes of heroin. And you know what? I guess the evidence was there, matching stash, whatever. And that woman went to state prison. But again, you had to believe the cop, right?
Right.
And
Well, I remember I was in SNU, Street Narcotics Enforcement Unit. So I remember with the binoculars on the rooftop.
Observation post.
Observation
right?
post, absolutely. Okay, you know.
And it's funny because the cop who was the witness, and I just remember the general facts was like, no, it's actually not so bad because the street lights are pointing down, and I was like, yeah, that's actually, you're right. You're not seeing the lights come in your face. And again, the drugs match it. But look, that was the Rockefeller drug laws, and that woman went to state prison she had a prior for 4.5 to 9 years for selling 2 glass scenes of heroin, and she was an addict. And again, maybe that wasn't the best way to address the situation. But, she made up one of those 62,293 felony narcotic arrests back in the day.
And that was the law back then.
And that was the law. Look, that's the other thing. The legislators, write these laws, and then, the police and the DAs have to go out and make the best of it. So yeah, the Rockefeller drug laws, somebody thought, if you sell, and we're talking about, one vial of crack is a class B nonviolent felony at the time. And, minimum of 1 to 3, second offense, second felony, 4.5 to 9. Somebody thought that was a good idea, right?
Yeah.
And that's what we did. We followed the law. The police made the arrests and we prosecuted the cases. Now, but by the way, treatment wasn't an option. Look, can you treat everybody? Is everybody out there, an addict, and you're going to treat them? No, that's not it. But there are people who are just selling small quantities to support their addiction. And look, I don't know how much it costs to house somebody in state prison, but I know when I did run for DA, Nassau County, it was like $600 a night to keep somebody in the county jail, right? You could have put them at the Garden City Hotel, saved a couple of bucks, right? That's a nice hotel. So the idea that you're going to, just jail people for years on end for, a minor offense, and maybe, and I'm not saying I'm not some bleeding heart, but I don't want to come across as, look, there are people that have to be prosecuted and sent to jail, violent felons, kind of like the bail reform, right? So bail reform, just the pendulum swung entirely the other way. I mean, I think anybody could agree, first time offense, nonviolent, what are we talking about? Bail, right? Not a felony, there's no mandatory, right? And then it became, well, really, we don't want to have bail set for anybody because people can't afford it, right? And look, that's a thought, because many people who couldn't afford bail would end up staying in jail until they could plead guilty and get out of jail. That's a system that maybe we don't want. But there had to be a way to tweak it so that if you're a violent criminal, if you have a history of not coming to court, if you're a danger, and New York is one of the only states that doesn't have a danger standard, right? Those are people who should be, society needs protected from them. So I know we didn't talk about bail reform, but it's just something that always sort of comes to mind when we talk about the criminal justice system.
Michael, are you familiar with the that pro-cop bill that Governor Hochul signed in Albany in December?
Yes. Okay. So there was it's now a law. The governor signed it. It's a good law, although it doesn't reach the ultimate issue. But now the state legislature has authorized counties and towns and school districts to allow the survivors of men and women killed in the line of duty to receive a tax abatement of up to 50%. So the state, in essence, the state's allowing localities, right, to decide for themselves if they should do this and how much they should do it up to 50%. So say Nassau County might say, okay, we'll do 50%. The city, maybe, we don't have a lot of money, 20%, but it allows the individual localities where the officer served to actually not even where the officer served, where the officer lived, to be able to give the surviving spouse a break, because their partner, their husband or their wife, paid the ultimate price to protect us, and they are entitled to something. There's a lot of charitable organizations like Tunnels to Towers do things like that, but this is just something that the governor recently signed that will allow localities, or through real estate tax, through school taxes, to apply up to a 50% reduction in the assessments. I mean, I think it's a good thing. It's yet to be seen how it'll be applied by each locality. But actually, I think it's a good law.
I think so also.
I agree.
Do you keep in touch? You used the word professional people a while back. Do you keep in touch with like law enforcement professional groups?
Sure. So, I haven't been to the RDNY in a while.
No, we haven't seen you in a while.
That's the retired
You got to come back.
New York.
I don't like to travel in the cold. I'm kind of like the groundhog.
Well, now
I know you do a lot of things. You do a lot of things in the spring and the summer. I know.
But now the guys, the president now, he's been having a lot of Don Alisi. He's been having a lot of events in Long Island now.
Oh, that's even better, Kevin, because I try not to get into the city,
Yeah, no, I know. It,
unless somebody's paying me an exorbitant fee, then I'm happy to come.
Yeah.
But I in the past, and I'd like to come to more. I try to regularly attend the Police Athletic League lunches. That's one of the charities that Mr. Morgenthau was a big backer. So look, my first 20 years in the DA's office was with Mr. Morgenthau, and I would attend those events. And actually, that's how I met Mr. Castamatidis, and I still go when I can. And those are always great events, and a lot of alumni are there from the DA's office or the NYPD. And so it's a good way to keep in touch. And then there are other retired members of the service that I do keep in touch with. But again, we work together. It's not and look, everybody has a role in the system now that I'm a defense attorney. But it's not an adversarial role in the sense that you have enemies. It's a case and whatnot.
Yeah.
So I do keep in touch with people that I've worked with and whatnot.
Mike, the PAL is a great organization. As you know, they do that event once a month, the luncheon.
Yep.
They usually have some good speakers. But I'm a product of the PAL, Duncan Center in Hell's Kitchen.
Oh, I didn't know that,
I played
Kevin.
roller hockey, yes, with the PAL.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, so that was, growing up, we had the PAL. So it was...
and it's still a great organization.
Great organization, great organization for the kids in the city, doing
right, and the programs they had, because you're one of those kids that keeps kids from going, maybe a different way.
Absolutely.
Yes, it's very important to support the PAL, the Fresh Air Fund. They're two excellent organizations that Mr. Morgenthau oversaw.
Yeah.
Yeah, now,
absolutely.
As you said, John Catsimatidis pretty much is very, very involved with the PAL.
Yeah,
Always has been.
yeah.
Him and Morgenthau were very good friends.
Yes, 100%.
As you both know. So
Right.
I'm interested. So you guys go back a long way. Okay. Unfortunately, Mike, I didn't really know you in the DA's office. Even though we were dealing.
Yeah,
with
you were hanging out with Hines. I get it. That's all right. Big Bird.
Yeah, exactly. But all good
Big
stuff.
Gagan, all the Irish guys. Right?
Yeah. But with all that said, I'd like to hear some good. You have guys worked a good case together. Maybe we could talk about. Well, try to talk about it.
I can't remember a case, but Judy and I went to. It was very funny. It was like 2009, and Pat Dugan, who was the chief of the investigations division, called me in and said, "Oh, there's a white collar crime seminar that I want you to go to this year up in Cambridge." And I'm like, I don't know. I mean, I don't really want to take a week away from, the office and, to go up to Massachusetts. He's like, oh, no, Cambridge, England. So I said, let me renew my passport. And so Judy and I spent a week together, and she was my guardian angel for the week. But we really can't talk about too much there. But literally, I don't know that yeah, she'll tell you later. It's something for off camera. Yeah. Literally, though, I don't know that we had a case together. Judy was doing a lot of identity fraud cases. I was doing organized crime cases. I was doing a lot of wiretaps when I was in the investigation division, doing a lot of construction fraud with builders and developers. But some of my favorite stories regarding Judy, maybe there's a picture or two that we can share with you, Kevin. And in fact, my favorite picture was taken by the Attorney General of, I think it was Fiji Islands, right? So this is a conference. But no, Judy has her own stories.
I know. I know. Believe me.
Although I do say we were petitioning. Okay, I will tell a Nassau County DA race story. 2015. Not a lot of people know I ran, so it's good. Not a lot of people know I lost. It was a Thursday primary. There was a downpour. We were petitioning, and we went into a rather notorious location, 100 Terrace Avenue. And so we're walking up, and Judy's helping me get petitions to get on the ballot. And these young men come out of an apartment, and they're wearing, I forget if it was blue or red. It was either blue or red. I forget if it was a Bloods or a Crips building. And they kind of like, check us out, and they see Judy's got, it was a 25 Beretta, like you had on your hip. I don't know. Nice. You would have had to shoot him wherever. But I felt very safe there that night. So that's probably the only story that comes to mind. Again, Judy being my guardian angel.
Now, Mike, any plans for future? You're going to run for anything, mayor, DA?
No, I would
Attorney
never
General,
run for
Governor?
office again unless I had a chance to win. I tell people I'm running for my life. That's all.
Well, Nassau County, Blakeman's going to be running for Bruce Blakeman's going to be running for governor. So maybe you want to throw your hat in that.
I like Bruce, and certainly met him and know him socially. But I have to say I wouldn't wish being county executive of Nassau County on my worst enemy. It's
tough job.
And the only reason I ran for DA was I thought I could do a good job. I wasn't interested in being a politician. I wasn't interested in that kind of service. I thought the DA's office needed sort of a different look and kind of to replicate what we had done in Manhattan out in Nassau. And apparently 23% of the primary voters that year agreed with me.
Yeah.
Which 77 didn't, Kevin. That's
I thought you would have made a big difference in transforming.
Well, DA Singas ended up doing a very good job. She's on the Court of Appeals now. Ann Donnelly's doing a great job. In fact, my oldest daughter is there as an ADA. She started in September.
Yeah.
So I think it's a really solid office. And look, I'm happy that the DA's office runs well. I live in Nassau, so I want the police and DA's office to do a great job, and I think they do.
Yeah, Ann Donnelly's gonna be coming on the show hopefully next week, so it'll be good.
Yeah.
It'll be good. Anything to our listening audience who may need a defense attorney? Hopefully not, but if you do, is there any way they could get in touch with you? LinkedIn or just Google me. It's funny, when I left the DA's office in 2012, I thought I'd just maybe do this for a year or two. And every year I say, I really should set up a website. But, thank God it's been, I've been lucky that, I've gotten enough business to keep me busy. And maybe this will be the year that I'll set up a website. But you can find me on LinkedIn. And again, when people ask me for their card, I usually tell them, yeah, I'll give it to you, but you don't ever want to have to call me because mostly I do, criminal defense. I do some civil litigation, but mostly related to, former clients, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. But you can find me on LinkedIn. Okay, great. Judy, any last words?
No, I love you, Mike.
Thanks, you too, Judy. You can tell Kevin the story about you'll tell him the story.
We will at the after party today, absolutely.
Boy, do I have war stories.
Oh, I know. I think I may have heard half of them, but I
don't know. Maybe.
But Mike, thank you so much. Michael Scotto for being our guest today. Thank you so much. And
thank you.
Judy Newton, Detective Judy Newton, for being our guest co-host today and your debut today, which was fantastic. And I want to hear those stories later.
Thank you, Kev.
But until next time, I'd like to thank all our listeners for listening today to another episode of Cop Talk. If you like what you hear, you can subscribe to Cop Talk at Cop Talk WABC. That's at Cop Talk WABC. You could also follow us on all social media platforms. And until next time, God bless you. God bless America. God bless law enforcement throughout the country. God bless our U.S. military. And until next time, be safe out there. Thank you again for listening.
Every week, the Payne family cuts straight to the real financial story.
The one question, Bob, everyone's asking is, are we in an artificial intelligence bubble? You've been through boom and busts. What do you think?
No hype, no myths. Just what actually matters to your money.
Does feel very similar to what we experienced in the 90s. Where are we, though? Are we in 1995, 1997, 1999?
Listen to the Pain Points of Wealth on the Red Apple Podcast Network.